I am May H. Kim, the moderator of this session. As a data privacy and cybersecurity lawyer, I am extremely excited to lead this session under this name title, Building Cyber Resilience. Well, over the years, a number of cybersecurity and data breach incidents have appeared in the news, but organizations are still remaining surprisingly vulnerable, with only 3% globally achieving a mature level of cybersecurity resilience. This vulnerability is all the more evident in South Korea, where in 2023, North Korea launched an estimated 1.3 million cyber attacks per day against public institutions. Yes, it is 1.3 million attacks in a day, ladies and gentlemen. This is a 36% increase from the previous year. And of course, the world is getting increasingly interconnected. And now you don't even need any special knowledge to launch a malware attack or a social engineering attacks, because all you have to do is to type in your prompts in ChatGPT. And this highlights the increasing importance of cybersecurity resilience. The world is simply getting more and more vulnerable. We need to develop and deploy technologies that can preemptively identify the high-risk vulnerabilities in our organizations and society. So today, this panel will explore how businesses and governments can fortify their cybersecurity defenses against these emerging threats, drawing on the expertise of leaders in quantum cybersecurity, cloud-based solutions, and military-grade cyber defense. Now, I'm honored to welcome to the podium Dr. Vikram Sharma, who will give us a brief presentation before the panel discussion. Dr. Sharma is the founder of Quintessence Labs, the leader of the global quantum cybersecurity industry, and a TED star. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Sharma.
Well, good afternoon. My name is Vikram Sharma. As May introduced, I'm the founder and CEO of Quintessence Labs. We're an Australian headquartered company that sits at the intersection of quantum and cybersecurity, basically using quantum effects to strengthen data protection. As we'll discuss through the panel, a number of advanced technologies which are coming about have significant impacts on cybersecurity. And certainly you may have heard of the impacts that AI will have on cybersecurity. In parallel, what we're seeing is major advancements in quantum technology. These, in turn, will have an impact on the cybersecurity mechanisms that we're using today. But interesting enough, it offers some of the solutions. So in these quick introductory remarks, what I was hoping to do is to give you a very quick overview of the development of quantum. And then in the second part of that, to look at, well, what does that mean for cybersecurity? And then finally, in terms of what we can do about it, might be a topic we can pick up in our panel discussion. So, quantum technologies have been around for the best part of 75 years. In 1947, a gentleman called William Shockley, leveraging the ideas of all the luminaries in the quantum world, so Einstein, Heisenberg, Niels Bohr, Max Planck, and so on. In 1947, we saw William Shockley and team develop the world's first transistor. This was done at AT&T Bell Labs, and it unleashed a revolution. In fact, over the last 75 years, as you can see on this chart here, it has just revolutionized our lives. In fact, it's become so ingrained that we don't even realize that we're actually leveraging quantum technologies every day. You know, whether you look at semiconductors, you look at lasers, GPS, MRI, and so on. These are all devices that use quantum technology in there. And what the remarkable thing is, from a single transistor in 1947, today the latest chips from AMD and Intel have 40 billion transistors on a single chip. If you can imagine that, it's just incredible progress. Interestingly, however, what we over the last 20 years have been able to do is generate quantum effects that don't exist in nature. And by harnessing this, a bit like super materials, a whole lot of new capabilities are coming to the fore. So as you can see on this chart, I won't go into it in detail, but we can happily pick it up in the conversation. Abilities to sense, coastline, for example, much better than what we can today. So imagine looking for submarines from a military defense perspective, or indeed prospecting for minerals underground. Computing, you might have been hearing and reading a lot about quantum computing. And this presents the ability for certain types of problems to be able to solve them many, many millions, even billions of times faster than our supercomputers today, by leveraging bizarre properties that occur right down at the quantum level of nature. So for these types of problems, they'll bring about enormous gain in portfolio optimization, in modeling pandemics, for example, discovery of new drugs. But interestingly enough, one of the problems they will solve very well is to break some of the key mechanisms that underlie cybersecurity today. And finally, interestingly enough, quantum gives a solution to the problem that quantum computer raises. And we'll be able to maybe pick that up in the conversation as we go forward. Just to look at recognizing the global importance of quantum, this is courtesy of our colleagues in the UK called Querica, have done a little bit of a snapshot as in last year, 2023, what the global investment was. And so globally it was about $40 billion. That's probably gone up to $50 billion already this year. Massive investments, because there's tremendous economic advantage, there's strategic advantage, indeed military advantage for those that can harness quantum capabilities very well. Interestingly enough, you'll see Korea has made an investment of approximately $2 billion into this. And in my own home country, the number's a bit out of date. Australia just announced about 6 weeks ago a $900 million investment into quantum computing. So it has also joined the billion-dollar club in quantum technologies. From a cybersecurity perspective, what does this mean? And this chart, I won't go into too much detail, but it's just designed to share with you that digital signatures, encryption, and authentication will all be impacted by an adversary that has large quantum computing capability. In fact, if you look at methods which are commonly used today in public key infrastructure, such as RSA key exchange, that will indeed be broken using an algorithm called Shor's. The good news is that symmetric key encryption will still be secure. We probably just have to increase the length of our keys. And then similarly, when we look at authentication, those mechanisms will be broken. So we need to come up with new ones. Otherwise, the three things that you see at the bottom of that, no communication could be trusted to be secure. You won't know that the person you think you're talking to is that person. And indeed, somebody could do a transaction and then say, no, I didn't do that, repudiate it. So this really would fundamentally impact our increasingly digital lives. And when will this occur? So this is a chart taken from our colleagues over in Canada, and it's a bit of a heat map. And they've asked a simple question. There's a particular kind of encryption called RSA 2048-bit. And the question they asked was, what is the likelihood that an adversary will be able to break this within 24 hours in different time frames, 0 to 5 years, 5 to 10, and so on. Basically, the summary of this chart is that within the 5 to 10 year time frame, the risk will go beyond the risk for many governments, large enterprises. There's so many risks that have less than a 1% chance of occurring that we go to extraordinary measures to protect against. This will fall into that same category. And indeed, in the discussion, we can talk about it, but the White House, for example, has just put their first estimate of what it will cost to transition US federal systems to be quantum resilient. And that preliminary estimate is $7.1 billion. And that has to be done, I think the White House says, by 2030. So a very, very significant opportunity. And in closing, I'll just leave you with a very interesting thought. There's a gentleman called Roy Amara, who was a researcher at the Stanford Research Institute. And with regards to new technologies, I always find this quote from him quite telling. We tend to overestimate the effect of a technology in the short run, and we underestimate what we'll do in the long run. So with those thoughts, I'll stop here and look forward to discussion. 감사합니다.
Thank you, Dr. Sharma, for the great presentation. I guess many of you may have questions for him, but let's spare it later till all the opening remarks are over. So now it is time for me to introduce Mr. Allworth. Mr. James Allworth is the head of innovation of Cloudflare and the co-host of the Exponent podcast. Please give him a big round of applause.
Thank you, May. And thank you, Vikram. That was very informative. So my name is James Allworth. I work at a company called Cloudflare. And for my opening remarks, I want to talk a little bit about cyber resilience and the internet. And I would start by saying that the internet was never built for what it has become today. It was originally envisaged in the 1960s as a research platform and potentially a network that would survive in the event of a nuclear war. But no one, we're all sitting here on our phones right now, no one back then imagined that it would become as prevalent and as relied upon as it is today. And that started to become apparent in the 1980s and 1990s when organizations started to use this more broadly. And the cracks in the initial design of the internet started to become apparent. When you're focusing on research and building a network to communicate, things like security, performance, reliability, they're not always considered. And so what organizations started to do was buy these things that I affectionately call Band-Aid boxes. They were boxes designed to fix the internet. Okay, we don't have security. We're going to buy firewall boxes. We're going to install them. Reliability is a problem. We're going to start to buy load balancers. Performance is an issue. We're going to start to look at things like routers. And they would install these in expensive data centers and manage them, a whole host of staff to manage all this network equipment designed to patch the internet, to make it effective at what we rely on it for at the time. That all worked well enough until in the early 2000s, the cloud came along. And at the same time, mobile telephony started to pick up. And the funny thing about the cloud is you need the exact same requirements out of your network, but you're not the one controlling the network up to the cloud provider. You can't turn around and look at AWS or call up AWS and say, hey, I need to ship you this firewall box and I need you to install it so that my traffic is secure. I've heard there's this threat actor. Or, hey, performance isn't fast enough. We need to ship your router. AWS, GCP, Azure, they don't have anywhere to put these devices. The cloud broke these Band-Aid boxes. They no longer work. And in the same way, there was a transition from with compute and storage up to the cloud. You used to buy a Dell server and you used to look after it. Now it's AWS. That same transition has well and truly taken place at the level of the cloud. And that is what Cloudflare exists to do. There are three big things that we help with. The first is when you have a property on the internet, whether it's a website, an API, an application, we help make it more secure, more performant, more reliable. In terms of beyond that, we help with a zero trust solution, and I expect that as part of a discussion on cyber resiliency, zero trust is going to come up a lot. So we have a solution that helps organizations deploy zero trust across their entire operation and also help network it up. So you need to get an office online, you need to get a data center online. And then the final offering that we have, the final problem that we help our customers with is a developer offering. So you're in the business of building an application and you come to us in that first instance to get more security, more performance, more reliability. Why not have that built in from the get-go? So we have a full-fledged developer platform that includes all the AI tools, which also will probably come up today in our topic of cyber resilience. I think it's a fantastic topic, and one particular thing that I want to make mention of, and I'm sure it's going to come up in the panel, is often a tendency in topics like this to conflate it with cybersecurity. And cybersecurity is part of resilience, but it's not the only part of resilience. I was in San Francisco airport about 2 months ago on a flight, arrived in San Francisco airport and noticed that a number of the arrival and departure and gate screens had blue screened of death. And I didn't think too much of it boarded the plane a little bit late, and the captain comes on and says, "Oh, we're experiencing some technical difficulties. The flight's been delayed." Turns out that those technical difficulties were our friends at CrowdStrike. Someone had shipped a bad line of code and had taken down Windows computers all around the world, and they all had to go and be manually rebooted. That was not a cyber attack. It's a really, this panel is coming at a very apt time. There's a lot more to resiliency. Cybersecurity is critically important, but there is a lot more to resilience than just cybersecurity. This can be natural disasters. This can be vendors that break. This can be a person in your organization unplugging the wrong cable. It's a really important topic, just given the importance of the devices that we all carry around in our pocket and how foundational they are now to everyday life. Thank you, May.
Thank you very much, Mr. Allworth. Well, that was like a lot of so much important insights that we can share among all of us. Now moving on to Dr. Noorma. Dr. Mart Noorma is leading the Cooperative Cyber Defense Center of Excellence in NATO, which is a multinational cyber defense hub. Please welcome Dr. Noorma with a big hand.
Thank you very much. And it's a great honor to be here to meet you all and discuss cyber issues with you. NATO Cooperative Cyber Defense Center of Excellence brings together 39 nations. And you might know that the number of nations in NATO is 32. So it's way larger than just NATO. And it just tells us the story of common interests and alliances, that we have like-minded nations working together to build up our resilience, which is the most important thing in cyber, and the readiness for the future, where we only can guess what the future will bring after these revolutions. And I'm very happy that Korea is a member of CCDCOE and one of the most active contributors to this cooperation. So at CCDCOE, we are addressing mainly cyber defense. And because the terminology is not so commonly harmonized across in these new sectors, and I would define that in cyber defense we talk about attacks, incidents where nations are responsible attacking another nation. Systematic, state-sponsored, advanced persistent threat, APT, malicious actors, causing harm to individuals, organizations, or another nation. And quite often it's not only financial, but also it might be geopolitical reasons behind that. So cyber defense, our main adversary is a nation state, a couple of nation states backing up their APTs and allowing them to cause chaos. So the user mechanisms, how we deal with criminals, do not work here. Usually, if we get somebody comes here to murder one of our citizens or steal our money and goes back to another nation, then we just work together with the government of that other nation, and we get, because we don't have direct jurisdiction in the territory of another nation, so we need to work with the government, and they will take this person into custody, and together we resolve the situation with fair trial. This is exactly the reason why, in case of cyber defense, typically these mechanisms don't work, because those governments, they are not cooperative. They will not give out their, actually they are behind half of these incidents. North Korea is the finest example, kind of using South Korea, trying to just theft, just typical regular criminal activities, trying to steal your money, taking it away from peace-loving people of South Korea, and nobody can take them into custody because government is behind that. So why I'm emphasizing this so much? At United Nations, there is active dispute going on for years already, open-ended working group discussing how we should, as a world, we should deal with international law and law in cyberspace. And there are two axes of, or two main directions of way of thinking. So our like-minded democratic nations are in very strong positions that currently there is no lawlessness in cyberspace. International law applies in cyberspace. And it makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? Cyberspace is nothing separate, nothing so specific, so different. Still, law applies. And the other part of the world, a couple of nations and their supporters, they push an agenda that currently it's too confusing, too unclear. So a new convention is needed to govern legal aspects of using cyberspace. Interestingly, it might sound like a very good, interesting, or a good proposal. Let's make things more clear. But the negative aspect, the moment when we accept that this new convention is needed, we also accept the hidden agenda that currently it's not so clear what is criminal activity in cyberspace. That means all APT groups, or most of them attacking us today, would not be clearly illegal. They would be maybe something not so legal, but we can't clearly say that they are violating international law. And quite interestingly, these two nations are behind most of the APTs attacking us and the rest of the world every day. So what can we do to mitigate these threats, to build up our cyber resilience? I think the key word here is the deterrence, the cyber deterrence. And it means that our nations need to work together to make it very clear that kind of behavior from these nations is illegal according to international laws. That's the first step. So we have been telling this to everybody in the world. We should continue telling this story to all the nations in the world, so everybody would understand that if a North Korean hacker group steals money from a person in South Korea, there is nothing unclear about it. It's clear violation of international law. It's a clear crime, even if their own government is backing this up. And how can we work together now to deal with these issues? So first, international law applies. We have to keep on spreading the message. Secondly, supporting each other to build our national resilience. And resilience, by resilience we mean even if the future is unclear, our procedures and doctrines allow us to meet unclear situations and deal with them flexibly. Then we need to be able technically to identify clearly who is behind incidents, and politically we need to have clear capability to attribute, say out loud, who is behind these cyber incidents. And we also need to keep in mind that we might need to respond in an asymmetric way to cyber attacks, and that's a clear position, official position of NATO, that cyber incident against a NATO nation can trigger Article 5 of NATO, which would mean kinetic response, so going to war, so to speak, triggered by cyber incident, which would have quite catastrophic impact. Luckily, nobody has challenged NATO to that level up to now, and I hope it will never happen. And to kind of wrap this up, I'm really happy that Korea is taking so much leadership in the region and internationally to speak up for this cooperation between nations, to work together against those nations who might not respect the international law. And just this week, tomorrow, big international exercise, APEX, Allied Power Exercise, starts here in Seoul, where Korean National Cybersecurity Center and Cyber Operations Command, with partners like CCDCOE, were bringing together 25 nations from Asia Pacific and from the rest of the world, from Americas, from Europe, and so on, to exercise together cyber resilience against malicious actors from those nations. So with that, I will stop, and I'm looking forward to all of your questions from the audience.
Very
Thank you.
much, Dr. Noorma. You gave us a lot of materials to think about, really. Now we can just freely talk about whatever issues that comes to your mind or will be valuable to the panel discussions. But let me just kickstart the discussion by asking Dr. Sharma this one thing. You talked about quantum technologies. I'm not sure whether I understand the exact workings or definitions of quantum technologies, but it seems evident that it is all around us already. Well, my question is simple. Is that a good thing or a bad thing in terms of cybersecurity?
Well, thank you, May. Interestingly enough, as I was pointing out in the opening remarks, for all the amazing things that quantum computers will be able to do for us in terms of advancing medicine, advancing new materials, optimizing a whole range of different processes, one of the things they'll be able to do is to be able to break some of the fundamental pieces of technology we use today for our everyday lives on e-commerce. If you go to your excuse me, favorite banking site and you type in bankname.com, you'll see a little lock that comes at the bottom of your browser. And what's happened there is that your handheld device or your laptop or your desktop has gone with the bank's computers, and they've done a bunch of mathematical exchanges to give you an encryption key, which basically protects the information going back and forth between you and the bank or your e-commerce company or other party that you want to exchange sensitive information with. That mechanism will no longer be effective. So in that regard, for all the benefits that quantum technologies bring, they will pose a risk to cybersecurity as we have implemented today. The good news is that we are already developing mechanisms to protect against this. And in fact, recognizing this particular problem, back in 2016, the National Institute of Standards in the United States started a search for a new kind of mechanism that would be resilient to attack even from an adversary that has a quantum computer. So they started off with about 100 or so candidate technologies, mathematical algorithms. And over the years, they've refined them down to a set which we believe are resilient. And it's actually quite timely that we're having this discussion now, because just 2 weeks ago, the National Institute of Standards announced their first 3 standards, which are believed to be resilient against quantum attack. So one is for what's called key encapsulation, so basically transfer of an encryption key securely between you and I. And the other 2 are for digital signatures. So when you sign something, you can say, okay, this is authentic, and also it's not been tampered with when it's being sent across. So that has really started a process now where a lot of organizations are starting to look very carefully at how over the next 5 or 6 years they will become quantum resilient. Why is this important to start now? It's because if you look at big organizations, whether it's government, it's a bank, it's a big company, it takes them many years to transition your cybersecurity infrastructure, perhaps as my colleagues on the panel here may agree, to new technologies. By the time you assess what technology is out there, you select something, you put it in your roadmap, you implement it, and then finally you've integrated your applications. Often that's a 3 to 5 year journey. So recognizing this, the White House, in fact, 2 years ago, President Biden put out a national executive order called National Security Memorandum 10, which is requiring US agencies 2 years ago to start developing a roadmap towards quantum resilience. And more recently, as I was mentioning in my opening remarks, about 4 weeks ago, the White House put out another report, which they presented to Congress and Senate in the United States, about what it will take by 2030 to transition systems of national significance and critical infrastructure to quantum resilience. And as I said, their initial estimate just for the US government alone is $7.1 billion. And then you multiply that by many times if we want to get large industry to that posture, and that's just the United States. You multiply that out to the world, it is a really significant issue and something I think we will see more and more coming to the front of mind over the coming years.
I would echo that. It's not just that your banking or the applications and the encryption technology that we rely on today will be crackable. It's if there are communications today that are encrypted in a non-post-quantum way, and those are recorded, someone in the future with quantum technology will be able to, with relatively greater ease, be able to decrypt those messages. So the longer that you wait to take the step to moving to a post-quantum world, the more that your communications today could be exposed in that post-quantum world. So I think it's important for folks to really to start moving on this. I see you reaching for the microphone, Vikram.
James, that's a fantastic point. Yeah, absolutely. So the term for such attacks, harvest now, decrypt later, or handle attacks. And in fact, Booz Allen put out a report about 3 or 4 years ago about certain nation states that are actively engaged exactly in this activity. So if you think about, take a simple example of a new pharmaceutical drug, from the time that formula's come up to the time it's in market, that's probably 10 years. So if somebody has managed to acquire, with today's encryption, the formula for that and have stored it away, but 5, 6, 7 years from now, they have a quantum computer that can break that encryption, exactly as James was saying. They can get that formula, produce a generic, and all of a sudden your billions of dollars of investments that you made are gone.
Yeah. The paradigm that I would use for this is almost like moving from paper and pencil encryption, which you saw like in the early part of the 20th century during wars. That's how these things were done. And then the early computers, certain algorithms that people would use would just be able to crack this with ease. And I think that's kind of the equivalent of what we're starting to look at here. Some of these traditional computational techniques that we use for encryption, quantum computers are going to be able to deal with them with the same level of ease that our current computers today were able to break some of these more traditional encryption techniques that you heard of during World War I, World War II, that were relied upon in really important communications. So yeah, I think this could, if it's not handled appropriately, if the investments aren't made, it could end up being a really big deal.
So another question that I got for Dr. Noorma is that everybody these days says that AI is the next big thing, or it's the current big thing. I don't know. But the AI is the biggest threat to cybersecurity as well, of course. So I wonder, do the government and international bodies in NATO, do they know? Of course they know, but are they really prepared, or at least making some efforts to protect all of us from these cyber threats from AI? Well, these are new types of security threats, right? What are they doing?
Well, thank you. I think it's quite common that we always react to things, and in democratic politics, I think it can't be the other way around. Or let's look at Korea. When Korea started to actively invest into cybersecurity, first place, I don't know, but I can bet that some big cyber incidents happened before that. Something big happened, and only then the government started to invest into research, into technology, and organizational resilience, and so on. So I think that it's probably the same way with AI. So we know it's coming. It's almost impossible to predict what it will bring, because this is a generic property of all disruptive innovation that we can only guess. Some things we know. We know that we get much more fake news, and we can't use video anymore as an evidence. This can be all faked so much more easier than before, and we go with the massive attacks become even more massive, because there will be a lot of kind of AI power behind that. At the same time, if we think about very well targeted attacks, which could be like, let's say, partially social engineering, like traditional spyware or spying techniques, I think it will not change so much, because a lot of people in intelligence agency are behind of these operations, and they are very well developed. So currently, while and we talk about AI as assault tool, that at the same time, AI is used to protect systems the same way. And there also very quick developments happen. Today, I believe AI is quite capable of handling as on cyber defense, cyber security side, this kind of massive attacks, but it's almost, or its capability to detect this classical spyware or classical social engineering type of attacks, or very well targeted attacks to some very critical, against some critical assets, their AI might not be so useful for many years to come. So all in all, I think in case of novel technology coming in, it's the same as in war. You don't really know what your adversary will kind of throw at you, but what you know is that the reaction, the speed of your reaction determines everything. And you all know this ODA loop from military. I'm mentioning because this was born here in Korea. This observe, orient, decide, act by Colonel Boyd, which is a decision-making loop of military. The same applies in everything else as well. And here we need to always quickly detect what kind of new attacks adversaries are using against us. We need to observe, orient, share information between the nations, between the organization efficiently, and then decide what we will do and act. So what we need to count AI-based risks and all the other potential risks, including quantum and so on, it's important to focus on resilience in our systems and flexibility of change and readiness to tackle with unknown. So it's all about procedures, freedom of action at different decision-making levels, and so on, so on. So I would say it's more like organizational question, how we set up our national level resilience, but the same way inside organizations as well. And at the same time, of course, investment into technology and in research and development is crucial here. And as Dr. Sharma already very nicely said, it's continuously growing. Thank you.
There are some interesting things in the AI and cyberspace that we're starting to see. Just as a follow-up to that question, the crazy thing about these LLMs is that it enables people to do things that they might not be otherwise trained to be able to do. And the technology is progressing at such a rate that you could start to see like it's come from kindergartner to primary school to secondary school. Now it feels like it's somewhere around the age of undergraduate. But you could see, like, if the rate of improvement continues as it has been in the next few years, you could start to see it at the level of postgraduate in any particular field, which is honestly both amazing and also quite terrifying when a tool is used in the wrong hands. For example, we see a lot of different types of attacks on the internet, and one type of attack that's relatively it's a relatively brute force attack, DDoS attacks. We're starting to see types of DDoS attacks that we haven't seen before, and our hypothesis is, and we can't be sure of this, that nefarious actors are using the LLMs to help improve the code that they use to craft these DDoS attacks and to find exploits that otherwise have remained hidden. We expect that only to continue. At the other end of the extreme, from the very untargeted DDoS attacks to at the level of individual, I met with a bank CTO recently, and he shared a story of how they had their first customer phished by someone using voice recreation technology to make this customer think that they were speaking to a relative, and sent money to this person believing this was actually the person that they were sending money to. Turns out someone had taken recordings of them off the internet, used it to train an LLM to create the voice, and had tricked this person into sending money. So it is definitely a potent weapon in the wrong hands. At the same time, it can be an incredible shield. The volumes of data that are created today, it's very hard for any human to be able to go through, but these AIs are able to, when trained appropriately, go through and start to detect anomalous behavior. For example, that same bank executive was talking about using AI to detect these types of unusual transactions and create alerts where there may be some pause before the transaction is able to go through, so the bank is able to call the customer and start to do verification. We use it on attacks. Like we would not be able to respond to the volume of attacks that 20% of the internet sits behind us. The number of attacks, and we rely on AI to be able to respond within milliseconds, where detect whether traffic is good or attack traffic. So it's definitely sword and shield, but the stakes are absolutely being raised by AI and I suspect this is only going to accelerate.
And probably just a small point to add to both my colleagues' comments here was that quantum actually has the ability to accelerate AI. So, much as today we might offload from a conventional computer, complex mathematics to a math processor, we have a graphics card to speed up graphical processing. What we're likely to see is hybrids in the future, whereby some of the tough compute problems which are solvable by quantum computers are offloaded from a traditional computer onto a quantum processor, thereby really accelerating the power of AI. Of course, there's developments going on in AI anyway, but having this massive additional compute power behind it could really almost exponentially increase the trajectory of what these AI models are able to do.
One more thing to come back to the original question around governments. One of the things that I've discovered talking to customers is that the longer an organization has been in existence and the bigger an organization is, the harder it becomes for it to change. It gets purpose-built in an environment, and many governments were built in the 20th century, oftentimes before the internet, and it feels like they're only just catching up to some of these cyber resilience trends, cybersecurity trends. We're layering on things like AI, we're layering on things like quantum, and I think it's really incumbent upon the people in this room who work in private industry, that work in cyber resilience, to be able to reach out to these important institutions in our liberal democracies and make sure they're supported to be able to defend against these things, because we rely on institutions like NATO, like our governments, every day. Without them, we'll be in real trouble. So I think there's really a big responsibility in the hands of private industry to step up and help in these instances. It's really, really important.
So we mentioned quantum technology and also AI, and one more big thing is cloud, as everybody knows, right? So the world is really fast moving to cloud, but many security solutions, or as I feel it, many security solutions still remain focused on network-based, intrusion detection systems. Yes. Is it okay? Shouldn't we really change faster?
I mean, it's an excellent question, May. I think, in my opening remarks, I referred to them as Band-Aid boxes. And for the time, these things were amazing. They enabled a whole generation of commerce. So I'm being a bit disparaging, but to recognize how important they were, I think is a really important first step. I think if you're moving your compute and your storage to the cloud, and there are really good reasons to do that, whether it's keeping things up to date or whether for example, you're in Ukraine and you see what happens in a kinetic war. If you have a data center that's just in one place and that gets destroyed, the data inside of it is gone. Whereas if you have a cloud and it's dispersed, then the ability for that to be more resilient is increased. I think if that's happening at the compute and the storage layer, then there needs to be a commensurate move at the network layer into the cloud as well. But more than that, most of the organizations in this room, their expertise is in their mission. It's whether it's a bank, it's helping the finances, or a government helping helping rule, govern the folks. Like their expertise should not be in having a whole bunch of network folks managing stacks of racks of networking equipment. And the rate of improvement, as with all these technologies, is only going to increase. And I think this is where the cloud really has a big advantage, right? You're able to hand off responsibility for this thing that is not a core competency, nor it might be very important to your mission, but that's not the thing that you want to have your people focused on. You can, okay, we're going to take care of our core mission, and you help us on the network side, you help us on the store and compute side, and it brings with it a whole host of advantages. But any solution that you come up with needs to be interoperable for those organizations that are still in a hybrid or primarily in an on-prem environment. It can't just be like, okay, we're going to ignore the fact that you have all this legacy equipment. You just need to rip it all out and move to the cloud. That's not helpful either. It needs to be something that is able to meet people where they are and support them where they are and help them improve their ability to compete on their mission.
So it has to be realistic solutions.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
If it's not pragmatic, it's not just saying, okay, you should be in the cloud, but you have all these racks of equipment, and many governments or banks, for example, still do. Like a solution that is cloud-based still needs to be interoperable with on-prem, but it gives folks a path to migrate away from that if that's the desired outcome, and many of them do have that desired outcome. It must be pragmatic.
And James, I guess feeding into that is also the issues of data sovereignty, right? That would also dictate on-prem and in the cloud. Love to have your thoughts on that.
I mean, that's something that we help customers with a lot. So one of the things that Cloudflare got its start helping accelerate, protect, and make reliable content all around the world. And by virtue of that, we had to build a distributed network. That architecture is a little bit different from the architecture of the hyperclouds, where they tended to build really big data centers in a few locations with lots of store and compute resources. And that made sense for the time. But back when they were being created, data sovereignty wasn't really a thing in the early 2000s. It's only really something that's emerged quite recently. As these data sovereignty laws have come into place, it's become really important for governments, but also organizations operating within jurisdictions to be able to guarantee that the data, or decryption as the case may be, happens in jurisdiction, doesn't leak out to a neutral third party, or worse yet, a jurisdiction that is unfriendly. And so this is where we're very fortunate to have this decentralized architecture. We don't have just a few data centers in a few places. They're in hundreds of cities all around the world, and by virtue of that, hundreds of jurisdictions all around the world. And we help a lot of customers with being able to keep data, encryption, or whatever it might be, in a specific jurisdiction to comply with the law. As someone who's a deep believer in the internet, I actually find this process a little bit sad. Every country adding on new restrictions, new laws. Once upon a time, it felt like you could put something out on the web and you could serve the entire world. And now increasingly it's fractured. I lament that loss a little bit, though I understand why it's happening. But again, in the spirit of being pragmatic, the path forward is to help folks find a solution to deal with all of these laws rather than just wish for the good old days.
I'm sorry we don't have time for closing remarks, but I think the panel discussions were great and it offered great insights for all of us here today. So thank you all, and it was a great discussion. So goodbye. Thank you.